So we've got a wonderful panel today, and it's no reflection on me that everybody said, Matt, you're not that interesting, bring some people with you. So, I took that in the best spirit and brought some really smart people. So in the end, we've got Kerri Buttery. I'm sure if you don't know her, what we're doing, she's always at these events, always super interesting. We're talking about, or to talk about the notes we take. When Kerri talks, pages. And it's usually like the latest tools, it's how to use the tools, well, we can draw it. So, Kerri, thank you for coming. Next to her, we've got Alena, the CEO of Axial Training. So, long-time Cloud Assess customer. Obviously, we brought some of our customers because we love them. They're very kind to stay with us every year. And Axial trains in, I think, a very wide variety, everything from business, engineering, automotive, hospitality. I'm missing many, but so very broad training, lots of good insights, no doubt. We've also got Scott from QR. So we talked a lot about high compliance, high safety environments. We're very big in trains at Cloud Assess. We seem to have just about every train company. QR has been a customer for about ever, I think, Scott? Yep, good. Really fantastic customer and got some really great use cases in how they use the tool. And on the end, last but certainly not least, Alex Fuller, the head of customer success at Cloud Assess. So for those who don't know Alex was the first employee. I'm the sort of Johnny come lately. I've only been here 18 months, but Alex has been instrumental to the success of the company. He's built up the customer success team, which I think, look, it's great to have a good product that people want to use. But if you don't have good support, if you don't have someone who you can call when you need help, it's a bit useless, right? And so Alex's team have been well trained. He's got some people with really long tenure, like 7 years and that type of thing. So really great support team to back up the product. All right, let's get into it. So we're talking about compliant training and assessment. And because we've got a mix of sort of the RTO and education side and the business side here, obviously it can mean different things. So, compliance when you're training and in the RTO space, ASMA's got lots of wonderful rules we've got to follow, so we have to be very compliant there. And in the business world, typically we've been more compliant to regulation. So you'll see, we'll use that word as being two different things here. But I wanted to throw to, I'll start obviously with you, Alex. What does compliant training and assessment mean to you?
Thanks, Beth. Very, very difficult questions and very broad to start off with. I suppose for myself, it's all about quality and rigor. So when we're talking about the output of training and assessment, we're talking about complying. Are you competent or not? When we're looking at competency, it's to a standard, isn't it? And that's where the compliance piece comes in, all the way along it. So when we're talking about compliant training and assessment, I look at the outcome. What's that outcome worth? What's the value to it? And that is the measure of your quality in your compliance piece throughout the process. Obviously, a lot that adds to it. A lot of process, a lot of rigor, as you say, in the RTO space and the accredited space. In the workplace, the confident outcome is absolutely as important. They both marry up. The RTO sort of will feed your worker, your workers. In the workplace, we are probably doing very, very similar processes, very similar standards, perhaps using different terminology, but when applied, especially in high risk as well, very much the same standard is applied. It's just not as well documented in some instances and the like, perhaps not as well understood, but the importance of it, I think, I've seen boiled over. It doesn't matter what business I walk into, if they're an RTO or not an RTO, they're very much living to the same training standards, same models, and have the same focus on that. So, I think it's a really sort of important part of the Australian landscape of how well documented the VEX system is here. But you go anywhere, even if they've never heard of it before, they are by it. Just far less documented. Yeah.
Feed you, Alex.
Okay.
And over the marks. Kerri's ready as Justin.
I was the one that said, don't ask me first. I'll just add to what you said there about documented. That's probably one of the most important parts of the compliant component of training, because we can do amazing things and make sure that people are well beyond confident and be really innovative in how we're doing that, but the compliance comes in with the documentation and the evidence that's retained.
Thank you for jumping in. And Alena, while you've got the mic, what does it mean to you and why is it more important than ever? Is it working?
It's working?
Yeah.
Oh, we're working.
Yep.
Compliance, the bane of my existence. And the thing that keeps people like me up at night. But I think if we can get compliance right, compliance to me and for the students that we teach needs to be individual, because we teach such a broad array of both academic and non-academic students. And some of the compliance, and I've been educating now for over 25 years, and I've seen good compliance and I've seen bad compliance and I've seen a compliance that's very indifferent or it doesn't really do anything. So in our company, compliance is it's the first thing that we look at, but we also look at, and the thing that I'm loving about the ASPRA 2025 standards is that we have the ability to be more flexible and create more and be more student-centric to that one individual student. So for us in our industry, we have a lot of students with some learning barriers. And with those learning barriers do come, different ways of needing to learn. And as a result, you have to not only tackle compliance, but you have to tackle how we get those outcomes when a student is unable to learn in the traditional methods. Certainly, Cloud Assess has helped me with this enormously over the last 12 months, and it's a huge piece that we're doing. But I think the 2025 standards, I'm like, yes, because I think we have now gotten to a place where we're not trying to make it a one-size-fits-all approach, and that learners have the opportunity to learn no matter what the barrier, if there's a barrier. It's not just about the highly academic ones.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And Scott, in QR, compliance is sort of, it's not being ASPRA standards, it's meeting a regulatory framework you've got operating or safety. Yeah, what does it mean to you and why is it extra important?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we do follow VET structure, but we also have the other side of it with the regulators and that kind of stuff. So that's definitely an important piece, but I think the regulator side is actually a higher level of compliance requirements were needed. So having, like we've already said, a documented and evidence-based capabilities, and it's also creating a culture where compliance isn't a dirty word, and it's everyone's responsibility no matter where they fit in the journey of learning, whether it's the learner themselves all the way up to, I guess, the training teams and the supporting teams that go inside that. So keeping everyone on their journey, making sure, again, today we've heard it's not just a tick in the box, it's relevant, they need it, they want it, and making it meaningful as well. So compliance assurance is a big part of that.
Yeah, awesome. So we've talked about how important it is to be compliant and to make sure that we're following all the rules. How do we balance that? I think this is really important because we know ultimately we're here to impart learning and then assess competency. And so Alena, it was really great to hear that you're sort of excited and I suppose a little bit energized by these new rules. What are some of the sort of real world use cases? How has that changed how you apply things, in your business?
So many stories. How much time do we go? Do you have many vet people in the audience today? Do we have many people from the vet sector? Yeah, cool, excellent. You like people.
I'm Kate. There is one story I will share with you.
You put the mic right up to your mouth here.
Oh, was it that? Shit. Okay, is this special? Yeah. All right, great. The big voice, so I'm just conscious I'm not doubling you all. We had, I guess we had a student some time ago, and she's been at she was in one of our school cohorts, and she was doing a diploma of business. She desperately wanted to go into her chosen pathway in university, which was a business faculty. and that she was severely hearing impaired and she was severely sight impaired. She had a lot of other intellectual barriers as well, but she was still okay for mainstream school. So we, her mother, the school worked really closely with her. We worked really closely with her. We taught her in ways that we had to think outside the box like you would not believe. This was just the most, I think, challenging, because when you've got someone that's sight impaired and you've got someone that's hearing impaired as well, you can't just put a screen reader on, or you can't just, have all of the technology. There are other ways that we had to find to teach her and get her through. Both her parents were very, very, very keen to get her to the end because she was really desperate to get into her chosen course in university. Anyway, we went right up to the 11th hour with her. We did mentoring sessions after school. We did one-on-one. She came to every class. She was really dedicated. Great kid. Got to the end and she was just starting to fall in a heap. We went right up to the wire. Anyway, we managed to get her done right at the 11th hour before all the QCE needed to be in the October. And she ended up getting an early offer to university, the first thing in her life the first offer she had ever been made, and to get an early offer was phenomenal. But not only that, when we went to the graduation of the school, we had the parents in the school and all the certificates were being handed out. I was handing these girls the certificates. When I called her name, the entire school, the parent body, the lot, everyone got on their feet and gave her a standing ovation because everybody was part of the family, basically, that was getting her through this course. It was so important to her, so important to her family. There were teachers in her past that have said that, she's never going to amount to anything, or she's never going to be able to learn, she's never going to be able to, get to the next phase in her career. And we said, well, no, we think she can. So, we got in there and, gave it a go. And it was just outstanding to see that a young lady with so many barriers was able to get past. So I say to all my students, if you're lazy, forget it. Because, if this young lady can do it, anyone can. Yeah. Anyone can.
What a great story. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, just awesome. And Kerri, I'll throw to you. Obviously, you see a broad range of different things. What sort of, strategies or, stories could you sort of share about how people are, sort of staying compliant but managing really great outcomes at the same time?
Yes, so we work mainly in the space of e-learning and compliances in audits and validations. So we don't really get to see the student stories. No, that's just amazing. What we get to see is the way that people are sort of interpreting units of competency and how they can twist them a little bit, how they can work out, how we're going to meet the needs of our students. Some things in our unit of competency, and Scott probably sees this, some things in our unit of competency are actually not allowed to be done in the workplace anymore, but we have to do it because it's in the unit of competency. So we often have to work on creative ways of coming up with scenarios and case studies and different ways of being able to demonstrate something that you're not actually allowed to do in workplace settings. And knowing that students then making sure that they understand, if you're in the workplace, just don't do it like this, but we've got to make sure you can. So that's probably, can you give us an example there? I'm trying to get my head right. Not a specific one. I know that there was one in Rail where it was around, really good. I'm trying to think, do you know one off the top of your head? It's being able to, go into safe rail corridors and different things where the unit says you must have this colour vest or, something like that, but actually now it's a different colour, like knowing it's silly things that change with legislation. So, I can't think of an exact example, but there are definitely things that change in units of competency. So a change in the industry and units can't keep up.
Right, so actually you have to understand, so and make sure you can pull both sides of it and then balance it out to get the right outcome. It's a great example. And Scott, while we're talking about rail, lots of different things you've got to grapple with. Any sort of good stories of how you manage your OPP assessment and making sure you stay compliant and keeping everyone engaged?
Yeah, definitely a couple. I'll quickly build on that one, and I guess thinking outside the box thinking outside the box on how we can achieve some of the elements of within units of competency, because in an operational industry, we don't all operate exactly the same. So there is definitely elements that are written in generic terms, but still can't be met by each individual industry. So it's about creating scenarios, but still trying to give it a level of context and meaning impact to the organisation. So yeah, thinking outside the box on how to achieve that is definitely interesting. But going back to that, so I guess the assessment side of it, we have been using Cloud Assess for a long time. And I guess with compliance, we as an operational industry like Queensland Rail, we've got, well, at least within the team that we look after, over 1,500 SEQ drivers and train crew. So the ability for them to be out on track, be compliant with, again, more so the regulatory side, when they need to learn the tracks, and although you can't turn left or right, there's still a lot that underpins it. So they have to learn every single section. And a big part of how we document and capture evidence to support that is, it's enormous. What we found is we've changed the way in which we've captured that evidence to then form part of the basis of our assessment. So we do a logbook type scenario, and we can now do that digitally. And then we can refer back to that. We can check that instantly. So if something, touch wood, happens out on the network, we can automatically see, okay, how many times have they actually gone over that section of track? What was the conditions as well? So we've got, key elements that we need to capture through that. There's a minimum guide of how many times they've got to operate over certain areas. And then we've got assessments, which again are formulated into like 4 different steps and requirements to make sure that we are seeing everything, not just it's a nice, bright, sunny day, nothing goes wrong, but what happens if, and how can they react to that at the same time? And I guess, the ability to capture the evidence, track the progress, do the assessment, and the ability to go back to regulators or anyone that comes, internal, external audits, and showcase is the story from start to finish, almost with a click of a button.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you talk about evidence in the Rail book. I mean, are you capturing video, audio, checklists? What else creates that deep evidence?
Yeah, good question. We have a blended method. There's a good checklist of requirements that we need, but we can also capture in our world, there's certain safety forms or other things that need to be done, whether it be like a preparation point, whether it's a safe working form to operate if something goes wrong, and the ability to capture that evidence live, upload, and have that in assessment tools as well, based on scenarios that are built, we can definitely do that. So whether it's taking a photo, scanning, uploading, taking a video of someone actually completing each individual step as it's supposed to be laid out.
Yeah, awesome. And so, Alex, we'll refer the next question to you. So, traditional learning methods have limitations, where we're trying to adapt these to frontline workers particularly. What sort of challenges do you see across our customer base? Obviously, you see a wide array of use cases. What do you sort of see around adaptations that need to be made or changes just to better suit those people that are away from desk and typically perhaps being assessed while they're doing their job?
Yeah, that's a really good follow-on question, actually, Matt. We kind of touched on the regulatory sort of requirements around how we have to adapt. We talked about the individual requirement that we're trying to meet and the reasonable adjustment and how we align it to individual requirements. We talked about the operational challenges. I think perhaps the next big one is the environmental sort of aspect of it. The lack of internet, the lack of device, the lack of resource that we might have based on, we're having to work in an intrinsically safe environment. We can't have connectivity. We can't take electronic devices in. I've seen that with clients. I've seen clients trying to train half a mile under the ground, and I've seen clients actually training underwater. Those environmental challenges are environmental challenges for a lot of organizations delivering training. But when we're talking about flexibility, we have to build in sort of variations and document what we're going to do if we're doing this outside of the grains. Obvious one. But there's a lot of environmental changes and challenges that businesses perhaps don't always foresee, and having the right tools and the right processes documented for managing that in different environments, I think really stretches the robustness and the compliance if we're not organised and not well prepared for that. I think here in Australia we've got such a diverse environment as well. Working with the QPS out towards Birds Hill Far West is a very different environment to be in for some obvious and less obvious reasons. When you can't pick up an iPad that's been on the passenger seat of your squad car because it'll burn your hands, right through to working with a major supermarket chain, and there's 3 observations that got to take place over one session, and they're working in minus 22 degree conditions in a freezer room the size of a football field. Those environmental conditions aren't, especially by a lot of regulators, accepted or understood when we bring the training challenge in. So I think that's probably something that I've been very lucky to see, how organisations do really well at adapting to those environmental challenges, and some are very unprepared for them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And throw to you, Alena, just thinking a little bit more about the more hands-on or frontline skills that you educate in. What sort of traditional models have you had to sort of adapt to try and move to a more sort of digital-first world, try and adapt some of the the latest and greatest learnings? Yeah, any sort of learnings you can share with us?
Well, we just went through a re-registration audit with Aswell, and I've got this up properly.
Nice clip.
I think that's. We just went through a re-registration audit with Aswell. 0 non-compliances. Thank you very much. Yay, exactly. That is a record. Because I've got a lot of grey hair, guys. Let me tell you, it was not painless. But a lot of that was discussed, actually, because, I'm still finding that there are a lot of auditors out there that are not being realistic. And they're not being realistic in the ways that we must train and assess these people. And to your point previously about the evidence, we must evidence everything, absolutely. If you can't see it and you can't, there's nothing captured that you could see or read or watch or whatever, there's no validation that competency or subject has been taught and assessed in its entirety. But in terms of going from traditional face-to-face through to digital, I feel like that's something that our governance bodies still haven't quite figured out themselves either. Because, we are becoming creative in ways, and we're taking videos and we're, asking them to, I guess, when they're doing interviews, we're capturing interviews. So if they're doing interviewing in Diploma of Business or something like that, they have to do a marketing plan and they're up doing a marketing presentation. We're videoing all of this, I think, the videoing, the digital logbooks that we have built has been absolutely phenomenal for what we do, because a lot of what we do is very practically based as well. So when it's practically based, we have to see it. So we built a digital logbook whereby it's mapped to all of the UNIF's subjects, and every single task that they do is videoed, hopefully, if they're doing it correctly. And then it's literally a case of click the button and up it goes into their file, and away we go. So we've really had to consider. So we teach. It doesn't matter. We teach face to face. We teach online. We do blended. We do distance education. We do the whole lot, and the whole lot can be done as long as you've got the right tools, I think. But I think our governance probably needs to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Get a bit quicker.
Yeah. Good examples. And Kerri, you're both an expert in the digital tools and you're very across the standards. Do you see the same thing, that there's some gaps there that need to still be closed, or do you feel, how do you feel we're making progress?
In terms of regulation catching up, across everything, it takes time for things to go through government processes. And this isn't just in vet, this is across, it's like what we're seeing with AI at the moment. It takes a long time for things to go through those processes. One of the conversations I was having yesterday was with someone from a government organisation who was saying, we can't use any of these AI tools that you're talking about in our organisation. They have to go through a risk assessment first, and the risk assessment takes 12 months. And then by the time it goes through the risk assessment, the tool's out of date, but one has different ones. And this is, it's just a lot of, it's not just regulation in vet, it's regulation across the board that does make it hard sometimes to be innovative and make changes to how we're doing things. And I suppose we have to look at some of those processes to say, what is the risk? There's many organisations that are very risk averse and sometimes not willing to let minor risks through. So like one of the tools that I was talking about was a tool that will generate multiple choice questions based on a reading that it will generate. You just give it a topic, it will generate a reading, it will create multiple choice questions. You're not putting anything into that tool that is of sensitive information. It's generating everything and giving it to you. You copy it out, you take it, use it where you want, make the changes to it. But they were saying, oh, we're not allowed to use that. So to me, the risk there was minimal risk to the organisation, and just, we need to have a look at how we can fill some of these gaps, looking at the risk assessments, but also can we just move forward with some of these things?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Over the years, I've seen the same sort of challenges forever. 12 years ago, it was the adoption of smartphones and iPads. I remember very early on in my career with Cloud Assess, walked into a mining site all full of beams that we were going to do this. I probably should have wore a stab vest going into the room because I was surrounded by people that just weren't comfortable with technology. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't want to work with it. And they didn't see it as a benefit. They saw it as a risk to their job, I think. That barrier to adoption was very obvious, I think, with technology. It is when it's to an individual, but it would have been exactly the same when we look back in childcare, and we look back into the medical professions around device being used and stuff. Huge resistance, and we're seeing the same when we talk about AI, and we're seeing the same when we talk about other models that are being brought into tech. It is just a moving challenge. And I actually think there's a really strong education piece behind it. That mining company did become a customer. Everyone in the room, I did have to arm wrestle. But when they can see the benefit, they can see how we control risk, they can document that. The key is to be agile. Any business that isn't agile has got problems and challenges. If our government organisations, no offence, Scott, are taking 12 months to evaluate a product's risk, there's probably something wrong with that process, not the fact that the risk is present. It's interesting that still decades on, we're coming across these challenges of adoption, because that's all it is. I think it's always been a big challenge for me. I've always got a very open and very obvious agenda when I go into a new business, but it's only ever successful when the people want it, understand the value and the benefit, and know how to control the risk.
And the change management that then comes with that as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're hearing a lot of talk about digital tools and recording high quality evidence, and obviously we're really big proponents of that. Can I see a sort of show of hands? Who's using paper? Who's using digital tools now, whether it's an LMS or other ways? If we sort of say digital tools, yeah, so we're seeing pretty high adoption. Anyone still just exclusively paper? Okay, well, we'll talk to you later. That's one person a customer. Excellent.
Everybody is a pen on
Yeah. Now, just thinking about digital tools and not always being biased to Cloud Assess, which is clearly, obviously awesome. You've heard the stories, it's amazing. But what other tools do you use? Like, Scott, is there anything else that you sort of integrate into your workflow that has made a difference?
Yeah, I guess in our area, safety is key in our operational environment. So you can't always go out on a train and do particular scenarios because you can't go and hit something in real life. Well, unless you don't want to. So we do have technology, by the way. We do have other technologies, and we've got an array of different systems, but we've got simulators that support that level of training. We can make it heavily raining, we can have it foggy, we can have, livestock on track, we can have failed boom gate or a car on track type thing. So we can replicate these scenarios that unfortunately they will deal with at one point in their career. And it's how can we actually actively train them and assess them to respond to those situations accordingly. Because you can't just put it up on a PowerPoint slide and they'll be right. You've got to practice that. You've got to know the steps in which you need and want to take, but you also need to apply those steps in as realistic as you possibly can. So I'll give you a plug as well anyway. We do have these simulators, but we also use, Cloud Assess. We were paper, not too long ago, but all our assessments are now in this online platform. And even though we do have these other technologies and other things that we do, Cloud Assess is still the platform in which we can assess. So they'll be in a simulator going through scenarios that are pre-built whilst we're following a script within Cloud Assess that goes, yep, this is what's happening. And even as an assessor, I can be on the control panel of the simulator and, put extra elements in that are, instructed as we go. And then I can put the evidence on, yes, they reacted and did this. As well as, making sure I'm checking off the requirements in which I need to.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I don't know anyone else, but I really want to have a go. It sounds pretty cool. Alena, I'm interested, you talked about not just face-to-face, but, blended online. So obviously lots of different digital tools, including, those obvious, Zoom, Teams, that type of thing.
Yep.
How do you integrate all those and make them work? What sort of check? It's a broad question, but take it where you want.
Good question. We do use all of the above. We use anything technology. If I can get my hands on it and we use it, I've got someone here in the room who works very closely with me. She knows how big I am on technology because I'm always looking for that next, just to stay a little bit one step ahead, I suppose, and to look at different ways of doing this, so we just don't get caught in this, one way to do things. But we use everything we could get our hands on, and the reason we do that is because we do teach a lot of distance education children, both in apprenticeships and in diploma level work, advanced diploma level work, who live on cattle stations and who live in the far outback, and they don't have access to everything we have access to here, be it on the Gold Coast or in Brisbane or what have you. So, all of those things are absolutely essential for us to be able to capture the teaching and learning. We do try and still physically, I still am a believer in physically trying to get out there to see the student, even if that might be once or twice, through the duration of their course. There are things that we like to do to ensure that the competency has been, taught correctly and retained correctly. But yeah, a lot of our distance learners will adopt mainly Teams these days. Seems to be Teams at Google Meet. Google Meet, it's the whole thing. So, that I did ask someone once to FaceTime me or FaceTime one of my team, and they didn't quite know how to do that because they were on Android. And the other one was the FaceTime. Oh, and the other one we had this little fella in far north who we do a lot of distance and remote education with, and he's only just turning 15, and his grandma, he lives with his grandma, and his grandma has a strict rule that he's not allowed on the internet. So, because he's a young boy and he's not allowed on the internet, so she changes the password all the time. So his cloud assess login, he can never remember his password. He's never up to date with any of his work. So I think, we can have the best technology, but we really need good grandparents that understand digital too.
Yeah.
Because Grandma's not a fan.
Yeah, thank you. And Kerri, the queen of digital tools, some would say. Anything that's sort of front of mind that you found particularly useful, or maybe send great use case?
I feel like the same thing. It needs to be a combination of different things, depending on what your needs are. You really need to have a good learning management system. Depending on what you're doing, you might need a student management system, obviously. If you're in the vet space, if you're not in the vet space, you might not need that. Also a CRM, so a customer relationship management system, all these RMs. A whole range of different ones where you can actually manage your data. Anything that's going to help you manage data and that will integrate with other tools. So there's this great thing called API, and it lets us connect our different tools to each other. And if the tool doesn't have that, chances are it's going to have Zapier. Zapier is one of the greatest inventions because we can start to connect different things. So one of the things that I've done with my workshops and webinars, I sell my tickets on Humanitics, and I have it set up that it automatically then sends it all through to my Xero account, where people will then get their invoices. It also sends through the registration to my Zoom account for a webinar, and I don't have to do anything. It all just connects to each other. So I suppose it really depends on what your purpose is to choosing the right tool, but looking as much as possible at integrating different things together to lessen the workload and manual interventions where you end up with mistakes.
Awesome. And I'll give a plug for, I think, a previous Kerri talk that I saw where she mentioned 11 Labs, which is an AI reader. And I have to say, as since I don't condemn, I use it all the time. I need to digest, maybe it's the latest ASQA standards that are a bit dry. You want to listen to them in the car because reading them is a bit, put it through the reader, things like that. So,
Dan's favourites.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now, we've talked a lot about digital, and thank you for bearing with us, but let's try and talk about some real-world outcomes now. So I'm really interested to sort of understand just maybe some examples of some real-world where you're getting training and assessment right to deliver really great outcomes and the benefits or the improvement you can get by getting it, absolutely dialed in. Alex, do you have any examples you could pull from one of our customers?
Nothing at all touched on Alena's earlier. I thought that was really, really impactful. It definitely rang true with, I think, every educator in the room. That's the kind of outcomes that we're looking for in the real world, isn't it? Where we make a difference. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to hold a cabinet to that one. With how we sort of apply it in the real world, I think is building that flexibility again in that sort of piece where you've got to be prepared for real world scenarios. In the real world, we will have lots of challenges. We will expect internet, we'll expect devices to be charged, we'll expect to have a printer if we need it, that sort of thing. I think the biggest piece around that is, having your training plans, your training processes, your assessment process really well documented with lots of variation that is still to the same standard. So we're not making sacrifice when we have to change the initial plan. I'll ask an organisation, how do you deliver that training? They will tell me, I'll say, if you can't do that because, how do you deliver your training? They're like, oh, it hasn't happened. It's possible it could though, yeah? And I think there's a lot of instances where we're slightly off plan, means we're slightly under par. I just see it all the time. I think really robust designs to handle that variation. When we look at it from an individual perspective, we're talking about sort of reasonable adjustment. We've got to look at all the other impacts to training, I think, and apply the same. How do we reasonably adjust, and how we do our teams delivering that training? Understand the protocols they should apply, because we do not want to trade off quality when we have to change the plan. And so many times it's such a linear route that I see people go, we start at A, we finish at B, nothing ever goes wrong. And that's just not real world.
No, very, very good point. So we might just throw to you, Scott, because you've given us some really great real-world examples already. Thank you. They've been excellent. A lot of your training assessment, I imagine, is around really mission critical things, like you said, making sure we don't hit things with trains. Very, very important. Any other really great examples of, some real world use cases where you feel like you've got it right and it's made, that sort of step change or that really tangible difference?
Yeah, I guess what I'll use is time. In an operational environment of, over 1,500 crew, it's not as easy as taking 10, 20 out on a day to go through training. We can't afford to, because otherwise we will stop a service. So it's about having that flexibility, having efficiencies and programs in place that enable you to achieve what you need to, that won't actually hinder your operational environment. So I guess, with that, when we have new train crew come in, we have a very documented, robust program that they go through before they'll go out, on their own. That's going to take nine odd months before we'll actually let them off on their own. And I guess I'll bring it back to keep maintaining their competency and how we achieve that for the 1,500 crew that we have out there. And it's, they have to come in on a regular basis every 18 months to go through a set process, and we follow a process of, and I'll chop and change as I go. So at the end of the 9 months, when they've gone through all the steps and requirements, we kind of have a clustered assessment that captures all to make sure that they've retained the information that they learned all the way back at day one, because it's building blocks. You learn something, you apply it, you've done it, you tick, I'm compliant in that, move on to the next stage. But when you're still moving to the stages, you're still applying what you learnt along the journey. So that cluster assessment that we have at the end of that piece, that's what we utilise to maintain our competency as well. So if it's good enough to go, yep, you're right to go out after you've gone through your initial training, then that's the benchmark that we will keep hitting to make sure that you are maintaining that level of competence throughout your career. So having a format flexible, because not everything's going to go as planned, especially in an operational environment, but having a structure in place that allows for flexibility, and a digital platform that also allows us to make sure it's as efficient as it can be, so we are taking them offline to do what they need to do without having adverse impacts in the operational world.
Yeah, awesome. And no doubt we all feel very happy about the levels of safety and training being done at QR. So thank you, Scott.
Thank God.
Indeed. Alena, we've got the mic. I'll throw to you again. You've got, like you said, a wide and diverse range of learners that you train. How do you keep them engaged? How do you, like you said, you're talking high school students through to, I suppose everyone and anyone.
Yes.
How do you make sure you keep them engaged in that process and drive out great outcomes?
Yeah, that's a huge piece for us. We have really good completion rates in really great outcomes, and that hasn't always been that way, mind. The last 5 years we've really achieved that, but it was really about getting down to the basal level of what a student looks like when they first come to us. So when they first come to us, you've all probably heard of the literacy numeracy and the literacy numeracy that everybody does, and these little tests that they do at the front end. Well, shockingly enough, half the time I was finding out that someone else was doing the test for them when I first came on board. And I was like, well, that's completely invaluable, because an educator would go in there and they're completely not prepared or not able to teach what's in front of them. So if you're trying to teach somebody that is not learning in a particular way because you haven't done the framework in the first instance and found out exactly how they learn best and what's going to keep them engaged. Are they kinesthetic? Are they a visual learner? Are they verbal? Have they got any learning barriers? Is that something they're prepared to share? Or do we need to find out the hard way? So one of the things is lack of engagement, I find, predominantly comes from not enabling students. And if we try and enable students in ways that they don't even understand because it's not aligned with how they think, it's not aligned with how they feel, that it's not aligned with maybe their background or their culture or whatever the case may be, we've got to be aligned with the student to keep them engaged. So we teach over 4,000 students, everything from Certificate 2 right up to Advanced Diploma level, partner with a lot of universities, and I'm happy to say that, we finally, I think, finally got our front end really well sorted. And that's where it starts, because the content is the content is the content. There's, so many of Axial trainings out there. There's TAFE, there's, RTOs. We've got some of the biggest, the most RTOs in Queensland than any state or territory in Australia. So, of course, we are all offering the same product, but what we are not doing is delivering it the same. And we're not delivering it the same because we're doing our homework in the front end and we're having a really good hard look at the student that's sitting there, because you can't make snow in a desert. And that is just an absolute fact in education. And anyone who tries to do the one-size-fits-all approach and doesn't care about that front end will see lack of engagement throughout the duration of their courses.
Yeah, awesome. Just scratch into that a little bit, because you talked about the blended and online. I imagine everybody, everyone in this room is doing a lot of online, whether it's doing training to your team or whether it's in meetings, and we've all seen that, that challenge with engagement when you're online. Are there any particular strategies that you found really help?
Well, in the vet space, we don't do purely online. That's in Axial, and that's on purpose, because I believe that most of our students are not as self-driven. One of my daughters is in university. She's studying medicine, and she's aiming to be self-directed. I can see her as a self-directed learner. She engages. She turns up to every exam. She's well prepared. She's all of that. Daughter number 2, not so much. All right, there's always one. But, again, 2 very different learners. One's very vocational based and the other one is very academic. So in the vocational space, we really don't do anything that is self-directed per se. We do something that is always trainer-led. It's always got... as much interactivity as we can possibly give these kids within the program without it being boring. But we try and keep it as interactive as possible when we are doing distance learning. But all of that learning is trainer-led. Yeah.
Awesome. Now we're going to open up for questions very shortly, so please start thinking about them. But Kerri, I'm going to throw it to you to... What lessons can other, industries or businesses learn from such highly regulated spaces, say as the vet industry? Is there, particular things that you think carry over or they could benefit from?
There's lots of frameworks. If you're in vet, you've heard all sorts of different frameworks. And while frameworks such as the ILP competency or core skills for work or ACSZ, there's a whole lot of them, they can possibly lend to other industries to provide a basis for how you might structure programs, capability frameworks, those sorts of things. So it may be that you're in a space that doesn't have any set regulations about the capability of staff, so you could look to the vet space for how to develop something like that. You could look at what are some of the governance practices that RTOs use that you could then put in place as well. Especially with the change now that we've had with the 2025 standards, it's less tick box driven and more outcomes driven. And it's about having flexibility to do things differently, but have the right outcomes in all sorts of areas. So I think things that RTOs are going to be doing moving forwards will be very applicable to other organisations. And I might just add one other thing that we should be looking at is UDL. If you don't know what UDL is, nice. Universal Design for Learning. So in terms of the engagement and catering for different learners, and if you bring some of those Universal Design for Learning practices into your initial development, it can then help with the rollout for different learners and being able to engage and cater for different learners as well.
Excellent. I agree. I'll just chip in on that one as well. With the new standards of 2025, there was a lot of focus on L&D. I was absolutely distraught to see that there was no focus on learning styles still. I'm really excited when clients talk to me around identifying learning styles and engaging with those foundational pieces really early on, because fantastic learning design will help, When we can have rails to run on and understand how, once we've identified learning styles and the requirements of an individual learner, what makes them tick, what excites them. No one of us is going to like the same TV program for different reasons, and we're going to have, a challenge with engagement if I've got to go watch something that the wife really likes, lots and lots, and likewise in reverse. And I think it's so important that there's focus very early on to identify that. LL&D, yep, okay, you can read it, yep, you can add it up, yep, you feel comfortable with the technology, but the approach, we're not even going to question, what works for you. I think it's such a missed opportunity that a lot of organizations have got fantastic processes in place for, but it's unusual, I think, in such a regulated environment not to see focus on that, because I think that really drives a massive impact for completions and engagement.
I think that's going to come out in the outcomes being achieved or not achieved in the end as well.
Yeah.
And there's an area that they'll have to be looking at in why are we not achieving these outcomes.
Yeah, awesome. So that can see.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? Oh.
Thank you so much, everyone, for that input. I'll try to make this more broadly L&D based rather than just show based. I do appreciate that. This is probably to you, Kerri, a little bit of Alena, but have you seen any technology that can assist with that front end you talk about students? We'll call it L&D, but even more broadly.
Yep.
Where the evaluation to identifying issues is more automated. The reason I'm asking is for a friend. The reason I'm asking is that it's, we don't want to get it wrong. People can't cheat, and it's very expensive to do it well.
In existence? Not yet. Yeah. It's actually something I'm working on in the background. But what we're finding, the assessment tool that we've been working on with the developer, we're trying to make it so that we can make these assessments context specific for each organisation and AI driven so that it actually will assess oral communication as well. But at the moment, it will cost about $5,000 or $6,000 per assessment, not per student, but the design of the assessment to train the model to be able to interpret the particular questions, conversations, etc., that it will have with the student through one of the conversational AI bots. And it's still at that point of being a little bit too expensive to be able to do something that's going to be specific to a particular qualification or area. But it is coming down. About this time last year, it was about 9,000. So it's getting there, but I've not come across anything else that will do everything up front.
So watch this space and one time Kerri for
One couple of years, is that?
6 months.
Unless you've got loads of cash. Yeah. Then we've got it.
We do have an organisation that's interested in doing it, so it might give us the opportunity to actually go through the process, and it'll be a bit of an experiment and see how it goes after the model's been trained.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe that's a next year topic.
Your question.
Yeah. Any other questions from the floor over here?
I actually wanted to ask if you have a go-to spiel or argument or a way that would help, especially we're talking to our executive groups, our senior leaders in an organisation. We're using AI. People are using AI. It's very clear, with or without guardrails around how we use it, okay? So when we get this pushback around, we can't use that, data sovereignty, people might put things in that they shouldn't, they probably already are. What would be your go-to argument to help us get those things across the line? And other than me saying the risk of not having a guardrail is that they're just going to use it however they want anyway.
Education. Just to say that. Education. Yeah. That's what Alex said before as well. Education piece of trying to explain this is going to happen anyway. Let's put something in place. And there's lots and lots of resources available. So UNESCO have got a framework that you can use to develop a framework for your organisation. So it's got a whole range of tools. I might send that to Nicole so that you can have a look at it. It's for organisations, particularly in education, to create their own, these are our rules, this is how we're going to follow these, how to evaluate the tools, etc. And it's a really good resource that you can make use of. And that in itself might have some good things to use, but it's about saying, well, people are going to use it anyway. You're better off setting the expectation and saying this is what we are allowing, and educating around, this is how you could use those tools, rather than saying no.
Yeah.
Anything from you on that, Alena? Or
Oh, I'm the same, and I'm so ditto. And the reason I add is because I still see a lot of companies, large companies out there that are just no to AI, no to AI, no to AI. Either their senior executive level are just not open, or they don't want to learn. They're scared of digital. And unfortunately, there's nothing any of us, and there's no product or magic button out there that any of us can, and I see it a lot in my role, a lot. So you are not alone. But definitely, it's about education, and it's about knowing what you can put in there, how to build, for instance, if we're talking about GPT, how to build a GPT correctly, knowing what you can put in there. And I think it's around, a lot of people talk about AI, but they really don't know what it is. So, and that's the problem. And the problem is that let's talk about it more. Let's start creating a narrative that becomes useful to businesses so that you can scale your business, you can create quality products, you can actually go out there and make a difference. Otherwise, unfortunately, you fall behind the eight ball. And, the companies that are using AI, that is going to be the future. And we're going to see that in the next 10 years, where everything's going to be predominantly AI. We need to get on that train, safe train, now. And I'm the first person to encourage all people to start learning and to go and get as much education as you can about it. Yes.
Come over. Gonna chip in there. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Sorry. I totally agree. Something I kind of alluded to earlier. It's the education piece and adoption, but it is definitely a change management piece. I said it earlier. The risk element is why it's a no. Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to address risk. That's where I would start within your business, because that is always the reason that, yeah. And it's an education piece, but saying that probably doesn't give you the enablers. I'm trying to get somewhere practical for you to walk away with how am I going to make that change. I would say, can we surface the risk? What are the evaluation criteria? AI isn't new. It's been around a decade, and more. Yeah, you're probably using it anyway in your business and solutions you've got now, and you just don't know it, or it isn't called down, or it isn't identified like that, but it's probably passed under the risk requirement. That's why you're using it. Yeah, it's just under a different label, and it was before the bandwagon. So I'd probably try and identify the risk and work back from there, because I think that's ultimately the barrier. Yeah, somebody accepting their risk.
no,
Any other questions? Is there time for at least one more?
Speak nice and close. Is close enough? Look, this might just be a topic for discussion, but a couple of you mentioned this. So Alena and Alex, you mentioned learning styles and kinesthetic learning and all of that. And there's been obviously a lot of talk around the education sector about the value of that. Now, I was a school teacher for 20 years, and it was a primary source of our, developing our learning materials and considering what type of learning style was beneficial. But I've recently been told by the organisation I work for, which is very schools-based, that theory has been debunked now for at least 5 years, and told categorically not to discuss learning styles in any of my PD with my teachers. But yet, and Alex, it may not be a standard, but I believe in the policy document around the outcomes, the intention that describes 1.1 uses the words learning styles in there. So I'm like, well, it can't be that debunked. Then it's your careful.
I thought adoption of AI might be our biggest challenge today, but that one.
I might just give it a
Everybody learns the same way, don't they?
So I just thought it'd be interesting to throw up a few ideas around what that debunked theory really means.
Just before you jump in, let's just get a show of hands. Raise your hands if you think learning styles are a thing. Keep it down if you don't. So, yeah, whether people have different learning styles or we can just teach everyone the same way.
Do we all have the same research? Yeah.
Sorry, a badly asked question, but you Dan, I stand corrected.
Thank you.
Yeah, so who wants to let? Yeah.
Debunked theory. Wow, that's interesting. I've not heard that. I think that's just so wrong. I don't know how else to say
Yeah,
it.
they claim it's the stubborn myth of learning styles.
Right. Okay. So is there discussion from these people around how they determine how best to get an outcome from a student who may not be?
Sorry, but one of the people I work for actually gave me a book which is sitting on my desk, and I can't remember, but it's got there's another article here from a Harold Fisher, I think, and his research actually claims that it is a myth, and that was 5 years ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, it says that there's no scientific evidence to support it, and while individuals may have preferences for how they receive information, tailoring instruction to a perceived style does not improve learning outcomes and may even hinder growth.
Okay. Harry Buttery on that here. The thing that's got us talking about learning styles, I think, is the answer. When we brought up learning styles, we were looking at engagement and completions. Yep. It's absolute evidence in every training delivery that I've ever seen that it is because we've engaged with the learner, because we've got the right delivery model, therefore we've got different learning styles. How can you argue that? You know, it's across every training delivery I've ever seen. You're either listening to me or you're not. You either like the same dessert as me or you don't. We're human, we're different, and we can definitely change outcomes by delivering to that person's requirement. I can't see what you can argue.
And on that note, we are over time, but I feel like there's going to be a debate that we could bring to dinner, isn't there? Right? You know, I feel like this could be the topic. Thank you for an excellent question, the cat amongst the kingdoms, and thank you everyone for listening. And thank you for the panel.
Thank you.